Hey everybody, it's Mark Dolfini, Landlord Coach. I hope you're having an amazing day. Before we get too far down the road, we're going to be talking about why real estate in the first place. So without any further delay, let's go ahead, drop the needle, get this thing going.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, I hope you're having an amazing day. Yes, I'm a little bit more casual today. You're probably not used to seeing me that way. I'm working from home. My son, our youngest son, is doing some work from home today, so I am home with him and helping him out. So here I am. I'm continuing on with the Daily Show. So I had a couple of things I wanted to go over today, and it is a crazy, crazy world out there. Good God. Okay, so there's a couple of things I want to talk about, and when I go out into the realm of people asking me if they want to get in the real estate game right now because real estate prices are so high, they're so out of control. So often I end up answering the question of why real estate? Why should I get into it? What's the what are the benefits to it? Obviously, there's obviously opportunities where you can buy a property for a lower price, put some money into it, put some sweat equity into it, resell it for a nice little gain, and there's tax benefits to that, right? So I'm not even gonna get into the 1031 tax exchanges and the long-term capital gains rates if you hold it longer than a year, all that stuff that we'll talk about another time. But there are distinct benefits to holding onto real estate, and people are thinking, well, what are some of those benefits? Well, ideally, I'm just going to hit some of these at a high level, and we're going to get into something here a little bit on the backside of the most ridiculous segment here in just a minute. But ideally, if you're going to hold real estate for a while, it's gonna have an income stream, right? So you're going to have this income stream, which if you do it right, most of the income should be passive. So you're really not going to have to spend a whole lot of time generating this passive income. The other thing is property generally appreciates over time. Even if you're buying it at the heights of the market, a lot of time it's still a relatively safe investment that you can recover that. I mean, I bought some of my properties at the height of the markets at various times, and even when I held on to it long enough, it always appreciated. That's not always the case in the case of equities or stocks, if you will, where if you're buying a stock, that's not always going to go up in price, right? Real estate's a very safe investment when it comes to that. So the other thing that I think people often recognize, but they don't really think about it when they're leveraging different or they're thinking about different investments, is that you can buy real estate with other people's money. Okay. Yes, you can leverage stocks, meaning you can buy on margin, but you can only buy up to 50%, and then you start getting margin calls where they make you sell if the stock value goes down or goes below a certain point. But generally, real estate isn't that way. As long as you're making your payments, even if the price and the value went down below what your mortgage is, generally they're not going to call the note due. Sometimes, again, as long as it's performing, generally you're reasonably safe from creditors, as long as you're making your payments, doing what you're supposed to be doing. So it's for that reason I don't like to get into rental real estate specifically and being over leveraged. What does that mean? Well, we'd have to have an individual conversation about what's over leveraged, but I generally like to have some skin in the game, at least some of the money, some of my own money, just so I can make sure that I've got a comfortable position and making some of that return, right? You can get into properties. Now, listen to me. You can get into properties with no money down. It's not that hard to do. It's harder to do than it was back in the early part of the the 2000s. But just because you can get into a property with no money down doesn't mean you should. Okay, just listen to that. Listen to the words. That's something like that can puke up on you in a really bad way. And a lot of my properties that I bought in the late 90s and early 2000s, I bought with very little of my own money down. into the property, into the transaction. So I was having these huge gains on a percentage basis, but you don't pay bills with percentages, right? You pay bills with dollars, and if you don't have the dollars, it can evaporate quickly. Ask me how I know. So before we get into and let me just point this out. One of the because you can leverage, obviously you can get big gains, but also one of the biggest values is how it legally offsets taxes because of non-cash deductions like interest payments that you would pay to the bank or investors or whatever, like depreciation, which is illegal. This is what the IRS allows for, right? Where you depreciate the property based on the life of the useful asset. And you can do cost segregation things where you depreciate, just like a component of the building versus the entire building. You can depreciate the roof differently and on a different basis than you can depreciate, say, the furnace or whatever. So you can depreciate. That's called cost segregation. So we're going to come back to that here in just a second. So let's go ahead and I'm going to head on in to our most ridiculous segment of the day, the most ridiculous thing I found on the internet.
So ridiculous.
Okay, so the most ridiculous thing that I have found on the internet today, I'm not going to make this a political discussion. It did not shock me at all that eventually I knew President Trump's tax returns were going to come out, and I'm surprised it didn't come out a little bit later so it could be an October surprise, but whatever. It is what it is. It did not surprise me to see that President Trump only paid, I don't even know, it was under $1,000 in federal taxes based on his tax returns in 2016, right? So it was one of those things where I was thinking, okay, well, President Trump, Donald Trump is a real estate guy. Okay, he's a real estate guy. Sorry, my dog's barking in the back. Again, working from home. But he's a real estate guy. Anybody that's in real estate understands that the part of the benefits of being in real estate is that you get things like depreciation where you can write off non-cash deductions. It didn't surprise me that there are losses. Again, there's been losses that you can lose and carry forward for years and years. If you lost money 3, 4, 5 years ago, you can carry those losses or carry losses forward, right? There's loss carrybacks and carry forwards. I don't remember all the individual rules because I have CPAs that do all this stuff for me, okay? So what I'm saying is that it didn't surprise me that came out, that he didn't pay much in federal taxes. What really does frost me a little bit is that they're calling it tax evasion. He's playing the rules of the game. Okay, and just like anybody who plays this game, any successful investor is going to control 4 things. Okay, so I'm going to share those things with you right now. So if you are doing well, right, you have to control inflation, you have to control fees, you have to control opportunity cost, and you have to control taxes. If you can control those 4 things, you're doing pretty well. I learned this from I kind of saw this in an from a 30,000 foot view, and I knew this is stuff that you need to control. But from a fellow author, is a guy named George Antone from The Wealthy Code. If you haven't read that book, it's a fantastic book. And he talks about these 4 things in that book: controlling inflation, controlling fees, controlling opportunity cost, and controlling your tax burden. So if you're controlling, now inflation is going to be a thing. There's no question. Everybody's expecting it. I don't know why the media is not talking about it, but inflation is, in my opinion, already here. I think that's a thing that's already started. Okay. So in terms of inflation, that erodes your ability to buy goods. And people think, we've been living in a generation of low inflation for, 2-3% since the mid 80s. And we don't know what inflation looks like when it's out of control, meaning that, your $1,000 that sits in the bank today will not buy a basket of those same goods 12 months from now, right? Especially if it's at 8, 9, 10%, which is what I'm expecting it. That's what I'm, in my back of the napkin math, I'm calculating that inflation is already at that level. But again, as I mentioned earlier, in previous video casts is we're being distracted by an election, social unrest, low gas prices. It's not hitting us. It's not obvious just yet. It's not that obvious just yet. So that's the one thing. In terms of fees, these are all sorts of fees that we pay. Bank fees and brokerage fees and whatever fees that we're out there paying. I know that there are lots of people who have a self-directed Roth IRA, which pay a lot of money for their fees. Now, granted, it's in a tax-sheltered basis or a tax-sheltered environment, but man, if you're getting eaten up in fees, you've got to be really, really careful with that, right? It was John Bogle, I think is his name, of Vanguard Funds, who was always a huge advocate for managing razor thin fees on these index funds, right? He was big about that, and not to get chewed up in fees on your mutual fund stuff, right? So that was the second thing. Third is opportunity cost. Now, for those of you who are not students of economics, or if you were, maybe you should dig out and dust off your books about opportunity cost. But that's the opportunity that you're forgiven, or you're giving up to use your funds in one way versus another, right? So in opportunity cost, if I invest my money in to make 5%, I'm giving up the opportunity of making 10% in a different vehicle, right? So that's why it makes sense to deploy your capital as best you can to make sure that you're using your capital the best way, right? That's opportunity cost. And finally, taxes. Now, taxes are a substantial amount when you actually start to think. Like I was talking with a guy the other day who was doing quite well in the stock market. And, he had said I don't even know what he did. I don't think he said an amount, but he was doing pretty well. And for him, I could understand why he would say he was doing pretty well, because he was deploying some capital, and he's made, a substantial amount of money in the stock market. And I said, yeah, man, too bad you're going to be giving away a third of that to taxes. And he's like, damn, I didn't even really consider that. And that's, just think about that. If you go out and you flip a house and you make 30 grand, for most of us, you're going to give away 10 grand to the feds, right? Just back of the napkin math. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about working hard over weekends, after work, for 6, 8, 12 weeks, busting your ass to make 30 grand, only to turn around and give 10 of it away to the federal government, right? Now, if you can control that in a tax-sheltered environment, you would get to keep that, right? Now, I'm not going to get into how to do that, because there are people way smarter than me to know how to do that. I know how I would do it, but I'm just saying, how would you feel about that, right? So in a real estate, you can do that through a self-directed Roth IRA. You can do that through other vehicles. You could 1031 it and roll those profits into something else. But my point is, if you can control that tax environment, then you're doing well. It was no shock to me at all that, given the fact that President Trump is a real estate guy, that he paid so little in taxes, because he has losses that you can use and move around and play that game. It's not that, I don't know why that everybody's acting so shocked about that, right? So I just would say, I borrowed this picture from the Boston Review. I would just like to see this witch hunt go away. And I'm just saying this witch hunt not just on President Trump, but on our elected leaders, because although I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not a huge fan of the man. I'm not a huge, Trump supporter. I will likely vote for him, but that's because he subscribes kind of more in ideology, in my ideology than the other guy, but I'm not in love with the guy. I think there's some things that he just says, and I'm just kind of, man, why do you have to be so freaking rude about things? And why do you have to be so damn brash? That's who he is, man. I mean, if you fault him for anything else, you can't fault him for his authenticity. He is what he is, and he makes no bones about that. So that's why I would say that, it's, if you're surprised that a billionaire is not paying, much in taxes, he didn't get to be a billionaire by being an idiot. Okay, that's all there is. So Anyway, and the reason why, just one last thought, the reason why he probably never wanted to share his tax returns, quite frankly, it would be like trying to explain how to win at chess and how to win at playing a game of chess in a 15-second soundbite, given how complex the tax code is. Don't hate the player, hate the game if you want, but don't hate the player. And that's kind of how it goes. So anyway, that's all I have for today. I hope you got something out of this. And please, if you are watching this on YouTube, you know what to do. Follow it if you feel so compelled. But if not, that's okay too. If you liked it, hit like. And if you didn't like it, hit like twice just to make sure it sticks. All right? Have a great rest of your day. Please make sure that if you are... please make sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. Most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you guys tomorrow.